November 15th, 2001.
With more than 300 special forces on the ground, the hunt is on.
We're tightening the noose. It's a matter of time.
With 8 aid workers now free, there are new details on their final minutes in captivity.
We feel wonderful. We're so excited that we're free.
Way to go, way to go.
Meanwhile, on the home front, with more than $1 billion in donations collected, the victims wait for help.
I have also car payments, my insurance, and I was making $45,000 to $50,000 a year. And without that, it's really tough on my family.
Tonight, the latest on the war at home and abroad as America fights back.
From ABC News, this is Nightline. Substituting for Ted Koppel and reporting from Washington, Chris Bury.
Never have Americans been so generous and so quick in opening their wallets to help. Since September 11th, they have poured more than $1 billion into various relief funds set up to help the 25,000 families hurt in some way by the attacks. Yet for all the good intentions, spending the money is proving far trickier than raising it. That became clear this week when the American Red Cross reversed itself and announced all money raised in a special fund set up after September 11th would go to the victims. An earlier decision to reserve more than a third of it for future emergencies led to a huge uproar and the ouster of Red Cross President Bernadine Healy. But affected families still have to negotiate a maze of more than 100 charities, and deciding who gets how much is a difficult and delicate task. We'll have more on that in a moment. Last night we told you about those 8 aid workers, American, German, and Australian, who were spirited to safety in Pakistan after spending 3 months in Taliban jails. This afternoon, the Pentagon released pictures of them shortly after they had been picked up by Special Operations Forces.
Hello, love you, we're glad we're free.
In Islamabad, reporters caught a glimpse of the 2 Americans, Heather Mercer and Dana Curry. Tonight, one of those hostages, the head of the Christian aid group, George Taubman, a German citizen, joins us live from Islamabad, Pakistan. And George, I guess the last few days must have been some of the most difficult, beginning with the fall of Kabul when the Taliban took you and the other aid workers with them. What was that like?
That's right. The Tuesday, just the day before the Taliban were kicked out of Kabul, we were just moved before in the evening again to a high security jail, and we already got the news that the Northern Alliance is advancing, and there was great excitement amongst all the prisoners. We were all looking forward that we would be all released in just a few hours, and we were very excited about this. And we already heard the fighting from the noise of fighting that was at the outskirts of the city, and we were really excited about this. And then suddenly, around 10 p.m., some of the leaders came in with the Kalashnikovs, the Taliban leaders, and then they took us out. They said, "We'll take you to a safer place. You will come back again the next day." But we didn't trust them, and they forced us out, put us in a vehicle, all 8 of us, and as I could see very soon that they were moving us out of the city and driving down in direction of Kandahar. We were really terrified by that because we're really afraid they would take us to this place. We saw a lot of vehicles just of Taliban fleeing out of the city, and so we're driving for about 2 hours to 3 hours in a night, and then suddenly they stopped at a place there and said, "You can sleep here, spend a night here." And when we got out of the vehicle, there was just a steel container sitting there at the side of the road, and they told us to get into this container, and we were more terrified even. We didn't want to go in there, but they told us we have to get in there. We just begged them. They wouldn't close the steel doors, and so it kept one door open. I was freezing the whole night. We were freezing, but we couldn't take hardly anything with us.
George, let me jump in here.
It was a terrible
George, excuse me one second. Let me just jump in.
Yes.
At this point, you're in the shipping container. Are you fearful for your lives at this moment?
Well, we would have definitely be terrified if they would have closed the doors. They tried to assure us that they hadn't any other place to stay, even though the man who was in charge, he left and probably stayed somewhere else. We were quite afraid that maybe something could happen when they put us into this container. But I think we all knew that they wanted to take us to some place because we knew already we were hostages and that they wanted to use us for some purpose. So at that point, we weren't so much concerned that they would kill us, but it was just a terrifying experience to be in a place like that. And they also didn't allow us to take hardly any luggage with us. So we're just out there and we're freezing almost the whole night through. Then in the morning, they picked us up again, and then they brought us to that city from where we later on were rescued and flown out. And there came another terrifying experience. We were told that they would bring us to a nice place where we could all stay together. And as we approached the city, somewhere halfway between Kabul and Kandahar, we drove up to a building which we could right away see it was a prison. We saw the bars, steel bars in the windows. It was a very ugly prison. We had already been in 4 different prisons, and we didn't want to end up in another one. And this was really the worst one that we have been in. We were shocked when we reached there, and were also very unfriendly to us. Had no facilities, no toilets. I mean, the toilets were destroyed, and we asked them to help us, but they were quite rough with us. We said, well, if anybody of us gets sick in there, we probably have no help. And we just we were still kind of in a shock. And an hour later, actually just when we arrived, the bombarding started there, we heard some bombs around the city were dropped. And then suddenly at an hour later, we heard fighting outside of the prison. People were running, and we looked outside, we saw there was clashes going on, and we didn't know what it was. And another hour later, at 11 o'clock, we suddenly heard people rushing towards the prison gate, and we looked down, they had weapons, but there were other people also that looked like civilians. We thought, now there's a mob coming, trying to get us. They may find out that we foreigners are here in this place. We were really terrified. At that point, every one of us, we believed that they are coming to get us and probably kill us.
And George, as it turns out,
for the people who come in.
Excuse me, George, we're running out of time in this section, but as it turns out, those people were your rescuers, and we want to pick up the rest of your story when we come back in just a moment.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by IBM.
And we're back again with German aid worker George Taubman. George, picking up your story, the men who you feared were coming to kill you actually were coming to free you. Tell us about that.
Yes, he just burst into our room. I think he didn't expect to see 8 foreigners sitting in there. They didn't know about this because we had just arrived there 2 hours before. He was amazed. He looked at us, and we stared at him, and then he suddenly he said to us in Persian that we are free. And we couldn't believe it, so we asked him, are you from the opposition? He said yes. And he says, you have come to free us? He said yes. And then we couldn't believe it. Some started to cry, to weep, you know, and for joy, and we hugged each other. We got up and they let us down. There was still fighting going on in front of the prison, so we had to still be in there. But then when the fighting was calming down, we were walking through the city. We couldn't believe it. People were coming out of their houses and greeting us and shaking hands and hugging us. And for us, it was like we were dreaming. You know, we expected the worst, and here we were. In the next minute, we were actually free. And it was incredible.
George, when the arrangements were actually made for the U.S. helicopters to come and get you, What did you do to signal to the helicopters so that they knew where you were?
Well, actually, I don't want to get too much in the details, but of course we personally thought it was much easier to just get out, because see, the situation was very difficult. We couldn't drive back to Kabul because there were still, the Taliban were coming back, and so we really needed to get out of that situation. And we had to, we were able to make contacts with the people that finally get us out, and we just had to, you know, we just had to decide on a location, and then just you know, signal to them that we were there, and then they came in and they picked us up. It was very traumatic because, you know, it's not easy. It was not easy for them to just find us, and also to arrange things like this in such a short time. But we were very excited that it all worked out. We were picked up and taken out, and we were so excited. It was unbelievable for us. It was almost like a dream. Just this, as I said, these last days were like almost the worst nightmares, and then suddenly it turned in just from one moment to the next into the most joyful events of being just first freed from the prison, and then and taken out of this city and brought back here to safety to Pakistan.
George, you were in captivity for about 3 months, since early August. I'd like you to go back and reflect on that time, and what can you tell us generally about what that captivity was like, how you were treated, and whether in fact there were several times at which you thought you might die?
Well, it was it was 3.5 months that we spent there in prison. We always thought we were just there for a short time and be released, and then they said we had to go to a court case. We went along this, and then finally, I think it was very shocking experience. We realized that we were actually hostages. I think since this September 11th event, and then of course the starting of the war, when that started, that was very difficult for us because all the foreigners had to leave Kabul. We were left alone there, and well, there were, I would say, the conditions in general there in the prisons in Afghanistan are of course quite bad. I must say they tried to provide us with good food and the things that we needed as long as we were in Kabul. But we were taken to 4 different prisons, and some of them were quite bad. And you can imagine, and when the bombing started, the bombing of Kabul, we were right there and watched everything, saw everything. Bombs were dropped all around. That's the mood of these people that had, in whose captivity we were, was not getting better, but
George,
we're
running out of time. George, just want to say that it's good to see you back safe. We know that a lot of people are very happy to see all of you back. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us tonight. When we come back, the monumental task of distributing the hundreds of millions of dollars raised for the victims of September 11th. Giving away the charity money raised after September 11th is proving to be a lot harder than raising it was. Here's Nightline's Dave Marish.
On September 11th, we sat here watching the Twin Towers fall.
Lori Slutsky is the president of New York City's second largest charity.
And like every other New Yorker, and probably like every other American, we wanted to do something to make a difference.
And there was a part of me that wanted to run down to ground zero and give water to the firefighters, or dig through the rubble, or hug somebody crying on the street.
Lenya Heitzig is the wife of an Albuquerque, New Mexico pastor. The 2 women helped make up a portrait of America's charitable response to September 11th. Lori's first instinct was to contact the United Way, the city's largest charity, and form a single entity, the September 11th Fund. Money poured in.
In the first 2 months, contributions to the September 11th Fund have been turned into almost $50 million of grants that have helped literally thousands of people.
CEO Joshua Gottbaum says most of the September 11th Fund grants have been given to other charities, like Safe Horizon, which has actually gotten help to victims at the One Stop AIDS Center on Manhattan's Pier 94 on the Hudson River.
Pier 94 is a collaboration of various agencies, nonprofits, government agencies, the police department, the fire department. Everyone has really come together to create what we have referred to at times as a small city. It's about 125,000 square feet inside, and each agency has their own section, and the family will come in and check in and get a checklist of the agencies that are there to help them.
Which is how things are supposed to work and usually do. But, says the head of the Community Service Society, New York City's oldest established charitable organization, not always.
There was a lot of disorganization, both by charities like myself and government in the early stages.
I went to Red Cross. You know, the lady took care of me. She gave me $95 of coupons for a family of 4. And then she told me I was supposed to get a check in the mailbox for $550, 10 to 15 days. I waited about a month, no check.
Then a friend told Rivera, go to the Community Service Society.
I knew it was coming or going. I mean, I couldn't talk straight. I was like all nervous. And Jennifer told me, take it easy, relax, we're gonna help you out. Take a deep breath, don't worry about it.
And just like that, William Rivera, for 21 years a custodian at the World Trade Center, until September 11th wiped out his job, his workplace, and dozens of his friends and co-workers, stopped falling between the cracks.
We are very much still creating the mechanisms to handle the distribution of the funds, to handle the interaction between victims who are saying, here are my needs, and charities who are saying, here's the money.
New York State Attorney General Eliot Spitzer says there have been too many cases of charities competing to serve the same customers while completely overlooking others.
In this time of need, the American Red Cross is profoundly grateful for your generous outpouring of support.
And one big case of a major charity using September 11th to raise too much money and earmarking it for too many other projects.
The Red Cross and its Liberty Fund are an example of how not to do it. They have raised a vast amount of money.
The Red Cross not only preempted many smaller charities with its national television fundraising campaign, it created doubts, says Spitzer, in the minds of donors.
They have then told people, we're not going to use your money for what you thought we were going to use it for.
But today, we are making a course correction for the Red Cross Liberty Disaster Fund.
Until yesterday, when the Red Cross apologized and changed its policy. Now it says all dollars raised in the name of September 11th will go to help victims of that day's tragedy. And the Red Cross now says it will cooperate in creating a single national database of victims and volunteers, needs and resources. A big breakthrough, says New York Attorney General Spitzer.
And instead of having that victim go to 18 or 20 or 100 different charities, the victim fills out one form. The charities look at that form, and suddenly the charities that have money dedicated to the purpose that that person needs say, here's the money for you.
Spitzer says the definitive database will help, but he also wants a stricter set of rules on giving and perhaps a single federal charity czar to oversee September 11th relief. That's fine, says the president of the American Institute of Philanthropy, but he warns don't let the rules strangle American generosity.
Its great strength is its diversity. There's a lot of creative solutions to these very complicated problems.
And I didn't want to remember burning buildings and rubble. I wanted to remember human beings who lived, who breathed.
So Lenya Heitzig formed Mercy Bands, one of more than 140 charities started since 9/11. And made bracelets with the names of people who died at the World Trade Center. Not, she says, to raise money.
It seemed like there were lots of people raising money. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but what I was trying to raise was mercy.
They're $20, ma'am.
Mercy Bands has sold more than 10,000 bracelets and made a few $1,000s. So Lenya Heitzig had to face the question what to do with the money. She found the answer in a familiar name on one of her bracelets, a former New Mexico policeman turned flight attendant, killed September 11th.
My wristband has Alfred Marchand, and he had an only son, Josh Marchand, who's 20 years old.
But because Josh no longer lived with his dad, who had remarried,
he doesn't qualify for some of the college funds that are being raised for the victims' children. And so what happens to Josh Marchand?
he becomes, thanks to mercy bands, another person no longer falling between the cracks.
So we're going to have to count on the people in the charities and the people in the government who are entrusted with the responsibility of deciding who gets how much money to exercise common sense.
Common sense will help, but so will uncommon patience and fortitude. Because, as just about everyone we spoke with told us, recovering from September 11th is going to mean providing much more than food, shelter, and counseling. For hard-hit New York City, broader questions like jobs, health care, the whole social safety net must be placed on the agenda, or 9/11 could become the trigger for a return to the worst old days of poverty, crime, hunger, and homelessness. I'm Dave Marish for Nightline in New York.
I'll be back in a moment. Tomorrow on Good Morning America, the American aid workers held hostage in Afghanistan for the last 3 months give their account of captivity and their dramatic rescue. That's our report for tonight. I'm Chris Bury in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
This has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.